What's up, everybody? On today's video, we're going to talk about the top 10 worst places to live in Florida in 2023. Now, I did this video in December. The only difference is that we got the crime rates for the entire year of 2022 back. So now we're talking about crime rates. When you talk about real estate appreciation or where people are moving to, we're talking about crime rates. Now, everybody from YouTubers to online lists are saying that Florida City and Belle Glade are the worst places to live in Florida. Let me tell you from firsthand experience, Florida City ain't the most dangerous place in Florida. I was out there on Martin Luther King Day. There was like 5,000 people. I might have been like the only white person out there. Nobody bothered me. They gave me some barbecue. They was playing music. Families having a good time. So let's get rid of this narrative that Florida City and Belle Glade are the worst places in Florida. Like I said, I was in Florida City on MLK Day, possibly the only white person out there. They also say that Homestead's the most dangerous city. The problem with Homestead and Florida City is that the city limits are just the urban core. Everybody in Miami knows that Homestead is all the way out to like 167 or something. And all those rural areas, if they were all part of Homestead city limits, Homestead would not be on these top 10 dangerous lists. Florida City is nothing but a small neighborhood. If you gave Florida City some of the rural areas like that are kind of right outside of Homestead, the same thing, it wouldn't be on this list. The problem with Homestead and Florida City is that the city limits are just the original core of what they were, and as the area grew, they did not expand the city limits. Jacksonville, for example, Jacksonville city limits are the entire Duval. Okay, if Homestead was the entire Dade County, it would be the safest city in the entire state of Florida. So let's understand that when you look at these city limits and the statistics that are gathered from these city limits, you get a pretty messed up, inaccurate evaluation of these places. But Homestead, Florida City, I was there on Martin Luther King Day, the only white person walking around, ain't nobody bother me. Families having a good time. I didn't even know it was Martin Luther King Day. I just happened to be in Homestead that day, and that was the situation, and it was an awesome time. Didn't have a single problem. In fact, they found me other Cubans, like 3,000 people there. These dudes right here on the left, they found another Cuban so I could meet him just as a gesture of kindness. Hey, shout outs to everybody in Homestead and Florida City. Number 2. Belle Glade, the same scenario. It was like 1 in the morning. I was coming back from West Palm Beach, heading back to Fort Myers, drove through Belle Glade, thousands of people hanging out. Again, likely scenario where the only white people out there. Not only that, I walk around late at night recording everything. Nobody bothered me or even cared about my presence. Shout outs to everybody in Belle Glade as well. I'm not going to put Belle Glade and Florida City on this list. If you look at the statistics, the real estate prices in Belle Glade have improved dramatically. And yeah, a lot of bad stuff happens in Belle Glade, but that's the people that are in the mix doing whatever they're doing. If you stay out of the way and mind your own business, it's not dangerous. Now, some of the cities we're going to talk about on our list are places where even if you don't mind your own business, they'll bring the problem to you. We're going to make another list of the top 10 worst small towns in Florida. And on that list, we'll break down the top 10 small towns in Florida that are the worst. On this list, we're dealing with larger cities because I have figured out that putting large cities and really small towns on the same list is absolutely confusing and almost impossible to explain from an analytical standpoint. And like I said, if the city limits of Homestead were proportionately like the city limits of Jacksonville, then we would be looking at totally different statistics. Because again, there's a huge rural part of Homestead that is not within city limits, just like there's a huge part of Jacksonville that's countryside and it's considered city limits. And they did that to lower their murder rate. If you took all of the rural areas that are outside of Homestead, Redland, and all Southwest Miami that's unincorporated and rural and turned it into Homestead city limits, then Homestead would probably be the safest city in Florida. Okay, that's what Jacksonville did. Jacksonville took on all these rural areas in Duval County, made its city limits to lower their murder rate, and even with that, they still have the highest concentration of murders in the entire state of Florida. I'm a dude that studies analytics and numbers, but I'm also a dude that's very reasonable and that thinks outside the box. And when it comes to a city like Jacksonville, where they've taken on the entire Duval County to lower their murder rates and crime rates to make themselves look good on paper, just because you look good on paper doesn't exactly mean that your city is safe. And I'm in Homestead a lot. Yeah, it's a city that you have to be careful in, but I've never dealt with any of the crap in Homestead that I've had to deal with in Jacksonville. So with the new crime analytics coming out, this is the top 10 worst places in Florida. Number 10 is Ocala, Florida. Marion County has one of the highest overdose rates in the state of Florida. And while on my past list, when I made the worst places to live, I never even thought about considering overdose rates. As we move forward, overdose rates to me are going to be just as important as murder rates. That means if your city like Ocala is constantly having people overdosing, that's going to mean as much to me as a city having a lot of murders, because at the end of the day, it's a life lost due to what? Crime. Yes, because overdoses are the vast majority related to a crime. It's a crime-related death, so it makes just as much difference as a murder to me when I look at these lists in the future. The metrics that we were using in the past to gauge these cities was almost always putting African American cities at a disadvantage. Now that we're looking at more categories like real estate appreciation, those OD rates, it changes everything. Number 9 is Tallahassee, Florida. I had it on my last list and I had a lot of people mad at me. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Last time we did a live stream in Tallahassee, Florida, we literally had people that were acting very sketchy. It clearly, and on a live stream, illustrated that it's a dangerous city at night. Hey, don't be mad at me, the YouTuber. Be mad at the people in your community that are perpetrating these crimes. It's very interesting how the people get mad at me for saying their city has a crime problem, but they're not mad at the criminals that are up in there tearing crap up. On top of having a lot of crime, there's also widespread homelessness. Lawlessness in general reigns as king in Tallahassee, where things that the state of Florida does not have legalized are commonplace. If it's illegal and you're doing it, it's a crime, it's lawlessness, and that means that Tallahassee belongs on this list. Moving on to number 8, Orlando, Florida. Some of the suburbs in Orlando are the best places to live in Florida. However, when you look at the city limits of Orlando, it's a crime-ridden place. Orlando has a relatively low murder rate. However, the robbery rate was the 3rd highest in the state. Only Miami and Jacksonville had more robberies. In years past, Orlando was a fun and active city. These days, when you drive through Orlando, all you see is homeless camps in the city core. I do want to say that in general, cities in the state of Florida are doing really well compared to other states. When you compare the murder rates and the murder numbers in the state of Florida to other states in the South, it is a vast difference. It's not as good as like New Hampshire or Vermont, but Florida's way better than the rest of the South. Number 7 is Riviera Beach, known to the locals as the Raw. Despite only having a population of about 35,000 people, they had 7 murders. Now, with a population that small, Riviera could have easily been considered a small town, but for a few reasons, I want to consider it with the larger cities. One being the amount of tourism and the fact that there's kind of like a skyline. It's part of an urban core, and it almost sits as an independent city amongst an urban area. It doesn't really sit alone as a small town. It's part of a huge metropolitan area, and that's why I'm considering it as a large city, even though I could have easily put it with the small cities if we looked at just population. Nonetheless, it's an urban place. It's got all the urban vibes, and the murder rate here is extraordinarily high for a place that's relatively small. Number 6 is Fort Pierce. With about 50,000 people, they had 10 murders. Despite having a small population, it has a huge murder rate. Luckily for Fort Pierce, crime rates are not the highest in all categories. What's happening in Fort Pierce is that as prices in South Florida continue to rise, A lot of the poor people and disadvantaged people from South Florida are ending up in Fort Pierce, and if the situation here is bad, it looks like it's only going to continue to get worse. Most of the places in Florida that are growing because people are moving to the area because there's something attractive about it. In the case of Fort Pierce, there's a lot of growth because the people that are moving here can't afford to live in other parts of the state. With people moving here from the state of Florida and not from other places, not a good thing. Moving on to number 5, Lake Worth, known to the locals as Lake Worthless. The city has done everything imaginable to try to, on paper, make their city look like a better place. They've had a lot of investment, and they even changed the name to Lake Worth Beach. So why did Lake Worth change its name? Well, the reputation that Lake Worth had got was so bad that they thought if they changed the name, it would just make everything go away. And also, more people were starting to refer to it as Lake Worthless than Lake Worth. So yeah, they had to do something about it. Despite their name change to try to clean up their reputation, nobody's buying that crap, and everybody still refers to it as Lake Worth. In the category of cities between 10 to 50,000 people, it had the 4th highest crime rate, making it the 4th most dangerous city there. Number 4 is Miami Beach. While the murder rate here is not bad, there is the highest crime rate, especially property crime, in the entire state of Florida. And if you go to Miami Beach, things that are illegal in Florida take place here as a common thing. However, law enforcement, embarrassingly enough, is not concerned with the real crimes. They're more focused on giving people parking tickets. This isn't a place you go with your family, especially at night. I mean, you don't want your children to inhale so much that they start to feel the effects. But despite the fact that this place is completely lawless, the only concern that police has is to turn a blind eye to things that are completely illegal in the state of Florida, but the city of Miami Beach just looks the other way. Well, what? Parking tickets. That's really the biggest thing going on here. A true embarrassment to Florida. Moving on to number 3, Daytona Beach. Here is a city that does have a very high murder rate, especially for being in Florida. With 13 murders and only 70,000 people, and the number 1 highest crime rate of all large cities in the state of Florida, the murder rate of Daytona Beach could pretty much mean that it would make more sense for the city to be in Alabama or Mississippi and not Florida. Although honestly, most people in Florida can't even tell the difference. Here's a city with Alabama murder rates and Florida levels of trashiness all combined into one place. Now, some of the suburbs like Port Orange and New Smyrna Beach are actually some of the nicest places in the state of Florida. But if you find yourself within Daytona city limits, you can expect crime, trashiness, homelessness, and all types of misappropriation and murders. Number 2 is Lauderhill, Florida. Located right outside of Fort Lauderdale, a lot of the people that are getting outpriced in Miami are ending up in the worst parts of Broward County. When the coronavirus lockdown started, nobody in Lauderhill had any mask, like medical-wise, but when it came to ski mask, everybody had a ski mask. And now that the pandemic is over, why are they still wearing ski masks here? We asked Kodak Black why they're still wearing ski masks, and he said, "'Cause I'm dangerous." He didn't say dangerous, he said dangerous. Rather you consider Lauderhill to be dangerous or dangerous? It's dangerous. The incomes here really suck, and I have no idea how people can afford the rents. Frauds and scheming is also a huge part of crime here that goes unreported on these lists. The number 1 most dangerous city in Florida is Jacksonville. However, it is tied, and I'll explain to you why. Jacksonville has the biggest concentration of murders in the entire state of Florida. When you look at Southeast Florida, murders are spread out between Opelika, Boynton, Palm Beach, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Homestead, and so on. But in Jacksonville, 129 murders and almost 6,000 violent crimes are packed into one single city. The vast majority of these crimes are happening within the old city core. Like I said earlier in the video, Jacksonville includes the entire Duval County. They do that to lower their overall crime rates and make their city seem safer than it really is. If Jacksonville were to have just the core of the city be the city limits, they would be one of the most dangerous cities in the country. And also tied for number 1 is Miami Gardens, known to the locals as Murder Gardens. Maybe soon the city will call it Miami Gardens Beach. Yeah, that'll make everything better, won't it? Because saying Murder Gardens Beach just doesn't sound that cool. 26 people were killed here, and with a population of just over 100,000, that puts their murder rate roughly at 20 per 100,000, just eyeballing it roughly. That is horrible. Those were Alabama numbers for Florida City. What Miami Gardens does have going for it is increasing prices in real estate and lower crime rates in other categories. In other words, overall, their crime rates are going down, but they're still killing. So whether it's a Murder Gardens or a Lake Worthless, we see that there's a few cities in Florida that have had a hard time with the reputation they've drawn for themselves. And you know the old saying, a good name is worth more than fine gold, unless it's Lake Worth, in which case it's worthless. So it seems like in some of these Florida cities that are improving, they're not robbing anymore, they're not doing violent crimes or property crimes, but they just can't stop killing somebody when they mess up. And on my list, I'm really not going to overlook that category of crime. I'm actually looking at which cities have the most murders, and that's pretty much giving me my list to a large extent. So just because other categories of crime are down, if you're still whacking a bunch of people, then you're still going to remain at least on my list. Alright guys, so that is the list of the 10 most dangerous and worst cities to live in Florida for the year 2023 based off of the crime rates for 2022. Preliminarily, like I said, I did a list towards the end of the year, but now that the crime rates are back, I can fully make a list that's more comprehensive. On the other list, I let something called real estate appreciation determine which cities were the best and the worst. But then I thought about it and I said, you know what? Let's just go purely off of crime stats like everybody else, since these rising real estate prices haven't really changed anything when it comes to people being killed in places like Ocala and Miami Gardens. On my last video, I had people that lived in these cities tell me that they didn't agree with the list. But if you live in a city and your argument is, I live here, it ain't that bad, let me just tell you that does not sound credible to the rest of us. And threatening me that you're going to unsubscribe from my channel because your city made my worst list doesn't do anything for your city or for me or for you or for anybody. You know, blaming me for my video isn't going to make your city any better. In the case of Tallahassee, they had 20 murders with a population of about 200,000 people. That's about, like 10 per 100,000. That's not ridiculous. It's still above the Florida average, but that's okay for a city to have a murder rate above the state average. I will say congratulations to most cities in Florida for not making an embarrassment out of us. One state over, Alabama, Montgomery had 43. Birmingham has been staying at around 77. So you can see that their murder rates are at least 3 times what our worst cities in Florida are. I've also had people ask me, am I afraid to go anywhere in the state of Florida? And I'll be honest with you, I'm not afraid of Miami Gardens. I'm not afraid of Belle, Glade, or Pahokee. Of course, I always use caution when I go to dangerous places out of common sense. I take normal precautions. But actual fear, the only place that really strikes fear in me is Jacksonville. Ironically, because there's so much real estate that they've built in Jacksonville and they're trying to get so many people to move there, I'm going to suspect that the reason they're putting Jacksonville on these magazines is because somebody's getting paid somewhere. Because when you look at the crime analytics, it doesn't make sense. When you look at the amount of murders, the amount of high-profile murders, and just the general feeling of safety that you have when you're in Jacksonville, it's very limited. I'm at the point where, despite the fact I enjoy going to the beaches there, I'm clearly just not going to return to the city on purpose, because every time I go there, I see something bad happen, or somebody follows me, or a few things we're not going to talk about because they're a little bit worse. The hoodrattery of this town has left me no desire to ever go there ever again by voluntary terms. And what's crazy is that I myself was looking to move to Jacksonville. It just didn't work out because I made an offer on the house. And when I made the offer on the house, the homeowner decided to go up $35,000 on the property, even though he hadn't got any offers on the property. He just did it because he thought since we made one offer that we would make more. I could have literally ended up in Jacksonville, Florida, in a house that had good bones, needed a lot of work. Then we went back and did a video in that neighborhood, and I'm so glad it didn't work out, because the neighborhood was a complete pile of trash. And because I was desperate to get out of South Florida, I feel like I would have almost been inclined to just kind of overlook that. And I think what happens when a lot of people move to places that suck is, even though the place sucks, you try in your head to tell yourself that this was the best decision you could have made. And even though there are clear signs that this was a stupid and bad idea, you just keep trying to tell yourself it was a good idea because it's a choice you made because you had no other options. Kind of like when I moved to Montgomery, Alabama. You made a bad decision, you just gotta roll with it now, and you try to tell yourself it was the best I could have did, but somebody comes and tells you the truth, definitely hurts your emotions. And I think that's what happens to a lot of people on my channel, is where my honest opinions just hurt their feelings. But what a lot of people fail to notice when they see our videos is that my videos are not intended to be watched by the people that live in a city. My videos are intended at an audience that's considering moving to that city. That's where we help people. Once you've moved there, or you're already stuck there, or you're from there, there's not a lot my videos can do for you. And that's what trips up too many people on my channel, is that they're watching the video from the perspective of somebody who lives there, but you're never my intended audience. Never is my intended audience the people that live in a town. It's people that don't live in that town, that are considering moving to that town. That's usually my intended audience. Because after all, the goal of my videos are to help people that are moving. But you know, so many people are watching my videos from those towns that maybe I should run a series of going to a town and trying to convince the people that live there that they should just let their town go to crap, sell out before it's too late. I've never really thought about that perspective. That's a good idea right there. Alright, so if you live in one of the towns that made my top 10 worst list that's on this video today, and you want to convince me that your town is not bad, please start off by first stating the murder rate for your city, and then after that you can leave your comment.